Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Freight Be Moving, all things logistics with me, Jewel Williams, your host. And today I've got a special treat. We're going to talk about something that is a very hot topic in the circles of transportation and logistic arrangement services. And that topic is the question, are you a freight broker or are you a dispatcher? That is a very deep topic, hot topic, and a topic that has caused a lot of friction in the freight and transportation arrangement services. So I am a licensed, bonded, and insured freight broker. I also have a CDL, and I can drive an 18-wheeler. So let's clear that up. Now, this article came out about 19 hours ago. It's in FreightWaves. It's by John Gallagher. The question is, the title is, FMCSA updates guidelines for brokers and dispatch services. So I went to the website of these specific regulation and I pulled it down. For all of you who may not know, all government information is not copyrighted because it belongs to us, the public. And therefore, under the Freedom of Information Act, we have access to it when they publish it. So I wanted to read this article with you. I want to share this article with you, this ruling. It's actually titled 49 CFR Part 371, docket number FMCSA 2022-0134, definitions of broker and bona fide agents. Agency, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, Department of Transportation. Action, notification of interim guidance, request for comments. So I'm going to read some very important pieces to this. And I read through it, liked what I read, because it gave guidance on who is authorized to do what. And if you are outside of those boundaries, for example, if you are currently dispatching, you may want to tune into this, put down what you're doing. If this is something that you've been thinking about getting into, if you've been wondering about things, well, right now, you're about to probably be wowed, maybe a little frustrated, and a little annoyed at what is about to be said. So I'm going to pop up, for those of you who are listening to the podcast, you're not going to be able to see the screen, but however, I'm going to read to you exactly what's on the screen. This is for all you YouTube watchers, give you something to look at besides me. Even though I know I'm gorgeous, darling. Absolutely gorgeous. Let me stop. Let me stop myself. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I've got up on the screen. I'm actually going to be reading from my paper, but I will scroll so all of you can keep up and read it for yourself. It's here. It's in black and white, baby. So this is what the summary says. FMCSA is issuing this interim guidance to inform the public and regulated entities about FMCSA's interpretation of the definition of broker and bona fide agents as it relates to all brokers of transportation of motor vehicle. FMCSA is taking this action to better define the terms in response to a mandate in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, also known as IIJA. After consideration of public comments received, FMCSA is providing clarification on its interpretation of the definitions of broker and bona fide agents. In addition to meeting other criteria required by the IIJA, while this interim guidance is effective immediately, FMCSA is also seeking comments in response to this interim guidance and may issue updated guidance if comments demonstrate a need. Effective immediately. So I'm going to jump ahead because they listed a few pages that they had, and they weren't as relevant to what the points are. And of course, You can read this for full on yourself. So I'm going to jump ahead to the background section. And that is Roman numeral 2, background. So it reads background. Broker is defined in 49 USC 13102 parentheses 2 as a person other than a motor carrier or an employee or agent of a motor carrier that is a principal or agent, sells, offers for sale, negotiates for, or holds itself out for solicitation, advertisement, or otherwise as selling, providing, or arranging for transportation by motor carrier for compensation. It is also defined in 49 CFR 371(2)(a) as a person who, for compensation, arranges or offers to arrange the transportation of property by an authorized motor carrier. Motor carriers or persons who are employees or bona fide agents of carriers are not brokers within the meaning of this section when they arrange or offer to arrange the transportation of shipments which they are authorized to transport and which they have accepted and then legally bound themselves to the transport. In the same section, bona fide agents are defined as persons who are part of normal operation of a motor carrier. They are part of the normal operations of a motor carrier and perform duties under the carrier's directions pursuant to a pre-existing agreement which provides for a continued relationship, precluding the exercise of discretion on the part of the agent and allocating traffic between the carrier and others. 49 CFR 371(2)(b). On November 15, 2021, the President signed the IIJA into law, Pub L 11758 135 Stat 429, Section 2321 of the IIJA directed the Secretary, FMCSA, to issue guidance within 1 year of the date of enactment of the IIJA, clarifying the definitions of the terms broker and bona fide agents in 49 CFR 371(2). The guidance must take into consideration the extent to which technology has changed the nature of freight brokerage, the role of bona fide agents, and other aspects of the freight transportation industry. Additionally, when issuing the guidance, FMCSA must, at a minimum, 1. Examine the role of a dispatch service in the transportation industry. 2. Examine extent to which dispatch services could be considered brokers or bona fide agents. And 3. Clarify the level of financial penalties for unauthorized brokerage activities under 49 USC 14916 applicable to a dispatch service. In an effort to obtain and consider stakeholder input in the development of its guidance, FMCSA issued a Federal Register notice June 10, 2022, seeking comment in 13 specific areas. 87 FR 35593. Stakeholder comments. Let me roll forward. I know I got a little ahead of y'all. So we have stakeholder comments down here at the bottom. FMCSA appreciates the robust response to our request for comment. Over 80 stakeholders filed comments in the public docket, including individual trade associations, brokers, and dispatch services. While the agency does not specifically reference all comments in this guidance, the agency would like to assure stakeholders it has reviewed and considered all comments and filed. Roman numeral 3, compliance with the IIJA technology. As an initial matter, commentators nearly unanimous that while technology has changed freight brokerage, such changes have not affected the fundamental nature of freight brokerage, nor are they relevant for the issuance of this guidance. One commenter did note that technology changes have exacerbated fraud problems. Accordingly, while the agency recognizes that brokerage has changed immeasurably due to technology, including moving from a phone-based system to one based on the internet, such changes do not impact the fundamental nature of brokerage, which involves arranging transportation for compensation, and hence do not have a significant impact on this guidance. B. Bona fide agents. Stakeholders provide FMCSA with useful information on the role of bona fide agents. Commentators have described bona fide agents as advocates or a sales force for a single motor carrier, an outside sales force that requires freight for an employer, a dispatch service used in lieu of motor carrier employees, people who look for freight for a motor carrier, a service that allows motor carrier to outsource operations instead of having employees handle them, a sales force from acquired motor carriers that big motor carriers use, and an operation where 10 people for one motor carrier and have no discretion to allocate traffic. Let me read that again. A sales force from acquired motor carriers that big motor carriers use, and an operation where people work for one motor carrier and have no discretion to allocate traffic. Based upon stakeholder comments, it appears that bona fide agents are generally considered individuals or entities that solicit business for a motor carrier. Other aspects of the freight transportation industry. Finally, stakeholders provided input, albeit more limited, on other aspects of the freight transportation industry. A broker indicated that other aspects of the transportation industry do not need to be considered. A managing general agency and program administrator for insurance companies focused on transportation indicated that FMCSA should issue guidance that is consistent with the Motor Carrier Safety Act of 1999 and moving ahead for progress in the 21st Century Act, MAP 21. A truck safety advocacy group indicated that FMCSA must issue a clear definition of broker that enables enforcement. And a coalition of stakeholders noted the significant ramifications of being considered a broker or not. While stakeholders did not provide FMCSA with specific information related to the requirement that the agency must consider other aspects of freight transportation industry in issuing guidance, the FMC recognizes that its guidance is operating in a broader context and has impacts beyond the immediate focus of this guidance. In today's notice, FMCSA has worked to avoid creating unintended consequences and issuing guidance on its interpretation and its regulations and related matters. While guidance may be relevant to stakeholder compliance with FMCSA's regulations, any changes to FMC's regulations and hence FMC's regulations and hence compliance responsibilities would need to be enacted in a separate rulemaking proceeding. Roman numeral 4, interim guidance. With the aforementioned consideration of factors as background, FMCSA now turns to the core IIJA mandate. The issuance of guidance pertaining to the definition of broker and bona fide agents, the examination of the role of dispatch services in the transportation industry, the extent to which dispatch services could be considered brokers or bona fide agents, and the level of financial penalties for unauthorized brokerage activities under 49 U.S.C. 14916 applicable to a dispatch service. This document does not have the force and effect of law and is not meant to bind the public in any way. And the document is intended only to provide information to the public regarding existing requirements under the law or agency policies. A. Definition of a broker. While FMCSA is unable to change the definition of a broker, absent a rulemaking, It is able to provide clarification here. As an initial matter, there was a split amongst stakeholders on whether the current definition of a broker was adequate. A majority of stakeholders believed that the current definition of broker was adequate, while others proposed some changes. A safety advocacy group recommended amendment of the definition of broker. A stakeholder representing the household goods, HHG, motor carrier industry asked FMCSA to clarify that merely selling leads does not require an entity to obtain broker authority. One broker believed that FMCSA should amend the definition of a broker to comport with changes in MAP 21 that required motor carriers and hence their agents to obtain broker authority. Additionally, internet-based load matching services have requested that FMCSA consider electronic load boards to not be considered brokers. Given the prevailing view among commentators that the current definition of broker is adequate, the agency feels the need to clarify it in only one area: the relevance of an entity's handling of funds in a transaction between shipper and motor carrier. FMCSA appreciates the robust input it received on this issue. Some commentators believe that whether one handles funds is irrelevant to whether one is a broker. A coalition of stakeholders believe the handling of money is not determinative in the broker determination. Other stakeholders felt that the handling of money had at least some relevance as to whether one is brokering. After consideration of the stakeholder comments and the important role of the financial responsibility in broker regulation, FMFC wishes to clarify that, drumroll please, handling money exchanged between shippers and motor carriers is a factor that strongly suggests the need for broker authority, but it is not an absolute requirement for one to be considered a broker. Definition of bona fide agent, Section B. Next, FMCSA is mandated to clarify the definition of bona fide agents in 49 CFR 371.2. Stakeholders provided feedback on this point. A HHG Motor Carrier Trade Association thought that the current definition was clear as to what entities fall within the term. A broker indicated that the definition should be eliminated due to MAP 21 requiring motor carriers and hence their agents to have broker authority. And multiple entities believe that in order to be deemed a bona fide agent, one can represent only one motor carrier. After careful consideration, FMCSA has determined that presenting more than one motor carrier, let me back that up one more time. After careful consideration, FMCSA has determined that representing more than one motor carrier does not necessarily mean one is a broker rather than a bona fide agent. Any determination will be highly fact-specific and will entail determining whether the person or company is engaged in the allocation of traffic between motor carriers. C. Role of dispatch services. Now, many of you probably need to lean in on this right here. So this is C, role of dispatch services. Next, the IIJA required the agency to examine the role of dispatch services in the transportation industry and the extent to which such services could be considered brokers or bona fide agents. Stakeholder comments make clear that there is no universally accepted definition of dispatch service, nor did Congress define the term in the IIJA provision mandating this guidance. One broker trade association characterized it is as vague a term, while a coalition of stakeholders said it is an invented term. According to a self-identified dispatch service, dispatchers represent motor carriers They don't connect shippers and motor carriers. They don't handle money, but they do provide carrier support services. Additional commentators stated that dispatchers perform back office operations for motor carriers. They book freight and perform other tasks. They perform many administrative duties and basic accounting for small carriers, and they are paid a percentage of the freight charges from a motor carrier. Other stakeholders indicate that dispatch services find loads for motor carriers, handle administrative tasks, and assist with compliance, source shipments, and allocate shipments between motor carriers. According to a shipper trade association, dispatch services would be expected to be like an in-house truck dispatcher. But in reality, many are operating more like brokers. A broker commentator indicated that dispatch services have multiple motor carriers in their client base. They seek freight and obtain freight for motor carriers, and they are paid by motor carriers. After consideration of the public comments, while it is clear that there is no commonly accepted definition of dispatch service, such services appear to have certain common features. First, they work exclusively for motor carriers, not for shippers. Second, they source loads for motor carriers. And third, they perform additional services for motor carriers that are unrelated to sourcing shipments. D, dispatch service, broker, or bona fide agent. I'm going to tell you, this is a juicy. I know this is kind of a boring read, but I think it is very important for all of us to have a clear understanding of what this means. Let me continue. Further, the IIJA mandated that the FMCSA examine when a dispatch service could be considered a broker and when it could be considered a bona fide agent. Stakeholders provide significant input on these points. A trade association indicated that when a dispatch service represents one motor carrier, it is a bona fide agent. But when it represents more than one, it is a broker. A broker thought that when a dispatch service only performed back office operations, it was not a broker. But if it arranges loads, it is. A dispatch service indicated that dispatch services are bona fide agents, as they are merely agents to locate freight and are paid a flat fee or percentage. Another dispatch service also believes that a dispatch service is a bona fide agent and not a broker because dispatch services do not connect shippers with carriers that can transport loads, and therefore do not meet the broker business model. A consulting firm believes that dispatch services are bona fide agents if they are employees per IRS regulations, but not if they represent more than one carrier. Several trade organizations believe that if a dispatch service represents more than one carrier, it is a broker, and that the handling of funds warrants a finding of brokerage. A coalition of 13 stakeholders believes that representation more than one motor carrier renders a dispatch service a broker. I repeat, a coalition of 13 stakeholders believes that representing more than one motor carrier renders a dispatch service a broker. And a broker believes that representing more than one motor carrier takes one outside of the definition of bona fide agent. Finally, a dispatch service indicated that broker authority should be required only when arranging transportation on behalf of shippers. After careful consideration, FMCSA clarifies that when a dispatch service does not participate in the arrangement of freight, or when it represents only one motor carrier, it is not a broker. If a dispatch service arranges transportation on behalf of multiple carriers and engages in the allocation of traffic, however, then pursuant to 49 CFR 371(2), it is not a bona fide agent and must obtain broker authority registration. Ultimately, the analysis of whether a person or entity requires broker authority is often highly fact-specific and must be made on a case-by-case basis. Regarding whether a dispatch service is a bona fide agent, one must analyze whether the service falls within the definition of bona fide agent in 49 CFR 371(2)(b). However, if the dispatch service allocates traffic between two motor carriers, it cannot be a bona fide agent by definition. E. Dispatch services that would not require broker authority. Let's lean in on this one. Generally, the factors relevant to whether a dispatch service is not required to obtain broker authority are stated below. 1. The dispatch service has a written legal contractual relationship with a motor carrier that clearly reflects the motor carrier is appointing the dispatch service as a licensed agent for the motor carrier. This is often a long-term contractual relationship. 2. The written legal contract specifies the insurance and liability responsibilities of the dispatch service and motor carrier. The dispatch service must also meet all state licensing requirements. The dispatch service goes through a broker to arrange for the transportation of shipments for the motor carrier. The dispatch service may not seek or solicit shippers for freight. 4. The dispatch service does not provide billing nor accept compensation from the broker, 3PL, third-party logistics company, or factoring company, but instead receives compensation from the motor carriers based on the predetermined written legal contractual agreement. That means if you are not under contract right now with your carrier that you are dispatching for, that is going to change immediately. 5. The dispatch service is not intermediary or involved in the financial transaction between a broker and motor carrier. 6. The dispatch service is an IRS 1099 recipient from the motor carrier or a W-2 employee of the motor carrier as specified in the legal written contract agreement. 7. The dispatch service discloses that they are a dispatch service operating under the authority of a specific motor carrier, and the shipment is arranged for that motor carrier only. 8. The dispatch service does not subsequently assign or arrange for the load to be moved by another motor carrier. Or 9. A dispatch service does not provide their services for a motor carrier unless that motor carrier specifically appointed the dispatch service as their agent in accordance with the aforementioned requirements. F. Dispatch services that require broker authority. The following factors would indicate that the dispatch service should obtain broker authority. 1. The dispatch service interacts or negotiates a shipment or freight directly with the shipper or a representative of the shipper. 2. The dispatch service accepts or takes compensation for a load from the broker or factoring company, or is involved in any part of the monetary transactions between any of those entities. 3. The dispatch service arranges for a shipment of freight for a motor carrier with which there is no written legal contract with the motor carrier that meets the aforementioned criteria. 4. The dispatch service accepts a shipment without a truck/carrier then attempts to find a truck/carrier to move the shipment. The dispatch service is a named party on the shipping contract, or number 6, the dispatch service is soliciting to the open market of carriers for the purpose of transporting a freight shipment. It is clear, based on feedback from industry, that there is a need and desire for dispatch services among large and small motor carriers. A beneficial role that a dispatch service may provide is the outsourcing of resources for small motor carriers who cannot afford a full-time employee to perform these functions. The dispatch service can help to ensure the motor carrier has a steady stream of shipments while allowing the motor carrier to focus on its core business of safely transporting freight. FMCSA does not believe it is the intent of Congress to eliminate the services that dispatch services provide. While no single factor is paramount in assessing the business relationship between a dispatch service and a motor carrier, the extent of a motor carrier's control over the individuals performing the dispatch services is highly significant, i.e., the dispatch service works on behalf of the motor carrier and makes decisions based on the motor carrier's guidance and direction. As noted, FMCSA determines whether a dispatcher is conducting broker operations on a case-by-case basis, utilizing factors including those above. Now we're going to get into financial penalties, G. And it says here, finally, FMCSA must clarify the level of penalties for unauthorized brokerage unauthorized brokerage applicable to dispatch services. Such an assessment is straightforward. If the dispatch service is deemed to be providing unauthorized brokerage services pursuant to 49 U.S.C. 14916, the service will be subject to applicable penalties. If
12 p.m.
Thank you, clock. It's 12 p.m. If no finding of unauthorized brokerage is made, it will not be subject to such penalties. V, which is 5. In Roman numerals, request for public comment. FMCSA requests public comment on its regulatory guidance and the factors the agency will use in its interpretation of the definitions of broker and bona fide agents. The agency welcomes comments from stakeholders that are relevant to identifying a dispatch service that engages in actions that would require broker authority compared with actions that don't require broker authority. Additionally, FMCSA welcomes comments concerning the potential impact of this guidance on dispatch services upon which the broker rules would be considered applicable. Robert Hutchinson Administration. This was published November 16th, 2022. So there you have it in all of its glory. That's the guidance. It's guidance. However, it is enforceable. So if you are currently dispatching for multiple carriers, I would definitely advise you, if you have an attorney, you might want to reach out to them. I'm not an attorney. I'm not a paralegal. I am a freight broker in the freight broker transportation and logistics community. I am bonded. I am licensed. I am insured. I also have a CDL, and I can drive that bad boy if I need to. But my message to you here today is that being ignorant of the law does not excuse you from the law. And even though you may not have heard this podcast and you may not have heard this message, you may not have read the rulings that have just been laid out, if you are caught dispatching and you are caught and you are claimed to be violating, and trust to believe, there are brokers right now that are salivating on finding you. There are insurance companies that are salivating on finding you. And it's not because they don't think dispatcher services are valid. It is costing the industry money when the claims cannot go against a bond or an insurance. When a driver says, hey, I got it from the dispatcher, and the dispatcher says, hey, I was doing it for the driver, the insurance company and the freight broker and the shipper are the ones that have to come out of pocket for the mistake that was made, for the negligence of the transaction. So this right here is about making sure to minimize the negligence by CYA, covering your ask for it. That's it. So I hope this information was helpful, and I hope you guys got something good out of it. I gotta go. Peace and love. And if you're driving, be safe. Whether it's an 18-wheeler or whether you're driving a 4-wheeler, I'm gonna need you to be safe. Get home safe and share the road. Peace and love.